Well, thank you all for joining us this morning. We're really excited to be here to talk to you for about 45 minutes about unlocking employee motivation. My name is Megan Sands. I am the managing consultant at Turning West, and we are an organization and leadership development firm based here in Southern California. And we really are driven by understanding how organizations really function and mobilize individuals to accomplish shared goals, to really increase their performance, and overall have a great and healthy organization culture. And so we are really excited to talk to you about motivation here today. I'm joined with my colleague, Dr. Kendall. And Dr. Kendall, can you introduce yourself as well this morning?
Yes, I am Dr. Peggy Kendall, and I work with Turning West. I'm also a professor at a university up in Minnesota, having a good time in Minnesota today. And I am excited about this particular topic because it combines my field of communication studies with organizational communication and organizational development, and it makes such a difference. So I'm excited to get started. So first of all, let me just quick go through what I hope you're going to get out of this whole thing. You're going to give us 45 minutes of your time, so we want to make sure that you leave with a couple of good things in your pocket. First of all, hopefully you'll be able to understand the benefits of motivation, because trying to figure out how to motivate people, it takes time and energy, and it doesn't happen just naturally. So understanding the benefits. And I think one of the most important things of today is to begin to think about what motivates you. Like what motivates you? What gets you excited about your job? And once you understand a little bit more about motivation, what it is, what motivates you, then I think you're really set up to lead teams in a way that you're able to motivate people individually, because everybody has a little bit different kind of motivational triggers. And so trying to figure out how to differentiate your motivation, I think, is really important. So those are the three things: understanding motivation, your motivation, and how to get your team motivated. All right. So this is how I think it would be good to start. Think of a time when motivation really made a difference, like a time when you were really motivated in your job. And then it's like, okay, what made you motivated? What difference did that make? I think that's where I'd like to start. So let me share one of my stories with you. So I had been teaching for quite some time. I was fine. I still like teaching, but, it gets a little routine after a few years. And so doing the thing. And then we got together and we figured out how to have a study abroad semester, right? So it was so much work, but it was so exciting and different and fun. We spent, like a whole semester with students. We built relationships. And when I look back at that, first of all, the fact that it was like this challenge, adventure, fun, every day is like different, and these relationships, it was like, that was so my sweet spot. But then when I got back on campus again, we did this for a number of years. I was the most motivated that I have ever been. It's like that change just gave me that energy, that adventure, and getting to know people on a much deeper level just got me so excited about every time those students were in my class. It was like, oh, this is so great. So I can see in that particular example that having this new program really kind of leveraged the things that motivate me. So here's my question for you, Megan Sands. Can you think of other examples of motivation and how motivation made a difference?
Yeah, so when I think about this, I jumped to thinking about previous clients that we've had, and a shift in maybe when we started with a client, they really didn't have a very motivated workforce or a very excited or engaged workforce. And then through our work with them, we really saw a significant change. So if I think of one specific client, this was a nonprofit organization that really had some challenges with their organization culture. A lot of their team members were not engaged. They were passionate about the work that they're doing with their clients, but they were not really passionate or supportive of the organization's leadership and decisions. They really had, they didn't understand their own level of autonomy or authority in the organization, so they could not make decisions on their own. And this, of course, slowed things down and created a lot of bottlenecks in the organization. And so this, of course, had a lot of operational impacts because the decision making was pushed through the organization and always pushed all the way to the top, so that there was no really responsibility or initiative kind of throughout the organization. And then on a personal level for people within the organization, I think it was really challenging because it's really hard to go to work every day when you're not feeling motivated or engaged or excited about what you're doing. And so even if you have a greater impact that you know you're serving for maybe your individual clients, it's really hard to get up every day and to go to work without this level of motivation. And so when we came in to help this organization, we really tried to help them to identify a clear direction for the organization, to increase their communication and their transparency through their process, and ultimately really help everyone to understand where they fit in the organization in its larger impact. So it wasn't just each individual's impact with their few clients, but it was really a larger impact of the organization. And it was really cool to see as we engaged them in this process of really first hearing their insights and understanding a lot of those maybe negative aspects of things going on, and then really helping them to shift that and to co-create a direction moving forward, to share ownership of these problems that they were facing. And it's really fascinating when people get to participate in solving the problem, and co-creating these next steps, they get really excited to then go and accomplish them and to solve those problems. And so in this specific example, it was really amazing to see that now we've shifted from a maybe unhappy and frustrated group of people to a group of people that were really excited for the next steps of their organization. And it's really impactful. And we'll talk today about all the different impacts that you see when this change occurs.
I mean, and that organization, it's so fun when you like get into a room with them. It's like you can feel the energy, and I don't think that was the case before. That energy and this willingness to lean in and work hard and innovate and all of those kinds of things. I really resonate what you said too about when you're not motivated. Just like Sunday night is so like awful. It's because it's like, oh, I got to get up in the morning and go to work. Like, oh, what kind of life is that, right? That's not the kind of work-life balance. It's not really what we're designed to be. So motivation, I think, is a really important topic. A couple of statistics that I found a little bit on the concerning side. Over the years, only about 30% of employees in organizations, this is from the Gallup organization, only 30% of employees are actually engaged and motivated. 30%. That's only like, well, that's not very much. But this one I think is really concerning. As many as 17% at this point, 17% of employees are not only not motivated, they are disengaged. They are like quietly quitting. It's like they do not like their job and they are not going to do what it takes to get the job done. So if 17% of your workforce is like totally disengaged, And you might have one person here and there who is really engaged. Well, I think you can kind of see what some of the implications of that are. A few other studies that I found, when an employee is motivated and engaged, they tend to be up to 20% more productive. And that's a statistic that seems to have remained steady for a long time through a number of different studies. Someone who's motivated is going to show up. There's going to be 41% less absenteeism. And organizations that have a majority of engaged and motivated employees will be 27% more profitable. I mean, that's like actual money, right? So as important as the money is, the fact that you can create a culture where someone does not have to dread getting up in the morning to go to work, where someone can come to work and be engaged and motivated, and it just frees them to do so many different kinds of things. So that's what we're going to lean into at this point.
All right. And we're also going to break this down into two types or two lenses to look at motivation. And before I define these two, I was thinking in preparation for today's session just about all the different negative impacts of low motivation. And as Dr. Kendall just described in those statistics, we see a big drop off, and we see challenges with absenteeism and productivity. But in addition to that, we really see that your service quality and the quality of the work in your organizations really suffers when people are not motivated. We often see a lot of people with higher turnover when this is the case as well, because employees are, if you're not motivated to be in your job, you're not motivated to stay in your job either. And so there's a lot of turnover and change there, which is really costly to the organization. And for those of you that are leaders and managers, you see the cost of the manager and the leader when you have high turnover as well, because you have to retrain and bring people up to speed and manage new team dynamics. And so increasing your retention and engagement is really important on a lot of different aspects. And overall, too, we want to think of this in terms of really at the individual level. How is the individual motivated? How are they doing with their own employee engagement and commitment to the organization? But then also at the team level, how is the team culture helping this motivation? How are people really understanding and working with one another well? And then across the organization, as we shared in the previous example, sometimes your entire culture is really not motivating, and this has big impacts. And so thinking about this on various levels as we go through the next couple of slides can be helpful.
Can I just, when you talk about this idea that the culture impacts this so much, because I remember so clearly being super excited about what I'm doing. It's like things are going well. And then I go to lunch with my colleagues and it's just a gripe session. And this is bad and that's bad. And you can maintain that motivation for only so long when you've got a culture that is sort of bringing that down. But when you have people together, I think it just makes everything so much easier to be free and motivating when you have other people who are also excited about what they're doing. And one of the statistics I saw recently was that people who are engaged and motivated will actually do more to help their colleagues. So instead of just like doing their job, they're actually going to get up and find ways to help and support their colleagues as well. So they're going to do above and beyond their normal job. So lots of important things about motivation. Okay.
Oh, thank you for sharing that, Peggy. And two, if we think about this, that when you're leading and managing, whether that's a team or an entire organization, motivation is really required to influence, lead, and manage individuals, because a lot of your job as a leader and manager is to make sure that we're getting work done, that we're productive in whatever activities we're doing together. And so we're not just monitoring performance and writing people up if they're not working well. We're really, part of our job is to motivate them to develop their skills, to improve, or to maintain that great productivity that they already have. And so as we think about that in our role, whether we're thinking of ourselves as the employee or as the leader in this situation, we can think about motivation in two different buckets. And one of them is intrinsic, coming from the inside, and the other extrinsic, really an external source of motivation. And so intrinsic motivation really comes from internal satisfaction and personal fulfillment for the work that you're doing. So this is really people that are, or the moments in which we're motivated intrinsically is really because we find the work rewarding, we find it interesting, it's meaningful to us, there's passion behind what we do, and there's a sense of accomplishment when we're getting specific tasks done or making progress towards a specific goal. Your excitement and curiosity and satisfaction all would fall under this bucket of intrinsic motivation, as well as your own personal growth. So our ability to grow in a specific skill or grow and advance in the organization is all tied in that intrinsic motivation. So those are motivators that come in from inside the individual, not from the external environment. And so we'll talk about more specific aspects of this in a moment as well, but we also want to think about the extrinsic motivation. So this is typically where we think of automatically when we think of motivation, especially in organizations, because this is the external factors or consequences of not performing well with extrinsic motivation. And so this is really your behavior when it's extrinsic motivation is driven by rewards like receiving something or avoiding some punishment. And so this might include your public recognition and rewards here really even being just your paycheck every day. So part of our motivation to show up to work is to get paid and to just have a livable life. And so that kind of basic necessity is part of extrinsic motivation. And then financial incentives on top of that typical paycheck is an external motivator. So maybe if you're working on a commission base and you're motivated to pursue new clients and to land new work because you get a financial benefit from that work itself. External motivation in the workforce also looks like growth opportunities. And in this, we really want to focus on really specific changes in advancement. So the opportunity to pursue a new role, the opportunity to have more responsibility or increase your paycheck. Sometimes it's all kind of tied to the salary on the external motivation in the workforce. And so this is one piece of motivation that we really need to consider as we're designing jobs. We're looking at compensation structures that people are compensated well and motivated at a basic level just to do their job to get that paycheck. And then we also want to consider that there's the intrinsic side as well, when maybe we're a nonprofit or we're a government organization that we don't have a lot of flexibility to raise everyone's salaries to try to motivate them in this way. We can really look at the intrinsic as well. And there's a lot of research as well around the extrinsic motivation kind of caps out, and there's a lot of different stats, and so I don't know the most recent dollar value, but it really caps out at some point. Once you make a certain amount of money, you're no longer motivated to increase that number over and over again. You are much more motivated by the intrinsic side, which Dr. Kendall will explain for us as well now.
Well, and I think sometimes when we think of like, how do I motivate my employees? There's plenty of external motivation techniques that are a little bit more on the coercive side. So you look at something like micromanagement. One of the research areas that I have is how to manage in a remote workplace. And one of the ways that some managers do that is to like make sure that their employees are at their desk working all the time. So they might have cameras or mouse movement things. I can't remember what you call them. But that kind of like micromanagement, like I'm watching you, is really using fear to motivate people. And fear can work at a certain point. But the thing is, then as soon as you leave, as soon as the manager leaves or is no longer watching you, all of a sudden that motivation's gone, right? And it can backfire. In fact, one of the studies I saw recently, when you micromanage in a remote workplace and you're just like super micromanaging, what happens is a lot of people, you get the exact opposite effect. So in other words, if I feel like I'm being watched all the time, all of a sudden I feel very little responsibility for what I'm doing, because you're watching and you're like, it's like, well, I guess it's your responsibility now. And because of that, they talk about this moral disconnection that happens. So in other words, it's like, all right, you're going to watch me. Well, I'm going to figure out ways to get around that, right? So you have all sorts of examples of ways that employees get around these sort of micromanagement techniques in the remote workplace. And not only does it not work, they're not more productive, but it absolutely kills motivation. I mean, I don't know if you can think of a time when you were micromanaged and just how it just kills motivation. I don't know if you can think of an example. I have an example. I'm going to share an example. So I was teaching middle school, which is probably not very motivating in the first place. But I remember I was a little nervous about this, and I do my thing, and I had this dean who would walk into the back of my classroom, and he would fold his arms and he would look at me, and he would stand there for like the rest of my class period. And then after the class period, he would tell me all the things that I did wrong. And he was like big into gum chewers, like it's like, and you know that you had 3 people chewing gum. And it's like, oh my gosh. And so, and he would come in all the time, and I was so scared of that guy. I would do exactly what he said. I was stressed out. I certainly wouldn't try new things. I wouldn't be willing to fail. And at the end of that year, I turned in my resignation. I figured, you know, I am not a good teacher. But then I got this job as an adjunct instructor at a university, and nobody was watching me. And it was just kind of on me. And I started taking some chances. I started figuring out what I was good at, how my approach might be a little bit different. I started enjoying myself. And I leveraged my own approach to things instead of having to do something to perform for somebody else. So all that to say, micromanaging, coercion, using your authority. Why do I have to do this? Because I said so. Using that kind of power and influence just kills motivation. And once motivation is killed, you have people who will not innovate, who will not collaborate, who will not admit mistakes, and will not really be doing the kind of job that you hope that they are going to do. So anyway, that's the negative piece of external motivation. But these are positive pieces. And you know, sometimes in the research, it's like, oh, external motivation. Oh, this doesn't work. But I'll tell you what, I heard of this company once. They had this contest with these teams who could save the most money doing whatever it was. And the winning team got like an all expense 4-day trip to like some beach someplace. It's a really cool place. And I'll tell you what, I don't care if it's internal or external. I would have busted my butt to get that because I would have really liked to do that. And sometimes like a big paycheck really does motivate me. especially if in my personal life, it's like things are a little scarce. But if I'm like feeling pretty good, it's not. So I think these things change. And sometimes money can make a huge difference. Sometimes money is not such a big sort of thing. So all that being said, anything else you want to add, Megan?
I think one thing I didn't really highlight earlier that I want to bring up is the first piece of recognition and whether this is a really formal recognition system in the organization or an informal process of giving feedback regularly to your team. Recognition and public acknowledgement of hard work is one that really doesn't cost any money, doesn't require a lot of effort, and is really something you can apply very quickly when you're thinking about this. And so when, say, I have a team member, we just talked through a really challenging problem, we're trying to solve it, and then the next week the employee took a lot of initiative, they figured out what we were going to do, and they solved the problem. Me acknowledging them in a group setting and saying, hey, Peggy, you really did an amazing job. It really helped us in this way. I appreciated that you took initiative in this way. Really acknowledging that in a public or one-on-one setting can have a lot of impact, because now, rather than avoid that situation the next time or let someone else solve the problem, that employee is much more likely to do that again, because they're like, oh, my boss or my colleague really appreciated when I did that. I'm more likely to do it again. And I think that's one that we didn't really touch on here, but I think is really important as we think about small ways that we can control, no matter who we are, where we are in the organization. That recognition is really powerful.
Yeah, I think that's great. So let me just quickly go through some of these internal motivations, because I really want to get into how different people are motivated differently. So some of these internal things, it's regardless of what you're being paid or what your manager is telling you to do, this is coming from the inside, right? So we see this a lot with nonprofits. A lot of times people are there because they are bought into that mission. We're working with a client right now that works with kids who are in tough situations, and those staff, I don't think they get paid a ton, but they are totally like into helping these kids. And you can see it every time they talk about things. So having a purpose, feeling like you're making a difference, that can be really motivating. Autonomy has to do with, can I make my own decisions, and especially in the remote workplace. I mean, can I figure out how I'm going to do this, the order I'm going to do it, what it's going to look like, or is every single thing dictated and I just have to follow the rules, right? Some people appreciate like super clear expectations and what it is I'm supposed to do, but some people like me, I like to do my own thing. I like to be creative. I like to leverage my own unique style, right? Feedback is another way, just like you said, of kind of making me feel like, okay, I'm getting this, I'm learning. This is, I'm really growing as we're getting into some of these things. Do you want to go over skill variety and task identity?
Yes, so these are also pieces of in the organization development term is really called the job enrichment model, and applying these to improve your engagement and satisfaction in specific job roles. And so the last two here are skill variety. So when employees or a specific job requires a lot of different skills and abilities to accomplish the job, we're much more motivated when we have to apply different skills. Maybe one day we're problem solving, and then we go to the next meeting and we're planning for the future, and then we go to the next meeting and we're really encouraging and helping a client. That variety of skill and ability in your day-to-day work is really motivating for employees. So when we're thinking about designing jobs or assigning tasks to people in the organization, making sure we have some of that variety and considering what that individual's specific skills and abilities are that we can apply to their role is important here. Task identity is also another piece of the job enrichment model that really is talking about the ability to complete a task from beginning to end. So if you think back to when we had, we still have this in some capacity, but a lot of robots are taking over assembly lines. But if you think of an assembly line, if I'm on an assembly line and I'm just putting two pieces together and I'm not even seeing the final product of the car that is being built or whatever the final product is, there's not a lot of motivation connected to that specific tasks. The work's going to get done, but it's not necessarily an exciting and engaging moment to just connect two pieces together, not understanding where it started or where it's going. And so when we think about this in a lot of our work that might be less hands-on, we want to help and encourage and design things so that people can see the start of a process, the start of a project, and participate all the way through to completing that project or process. Because if we only participate in a piece of it, we're not seeing the impact of it. We're not understanding the purpose of why we did that. And that, again, kind of impacts the motivation and engagement of your employees.
Yeah. I mean, so if you look at these 5 things, it's like as a team leader, you think about ways you can change things around to enhance some of these pieces, which will in turn help motivate the people who work for you. So how can you, like, I worked with this this bank owner, and one of the things he did, you know, banking, it's like purpose, like help people get rich, whatever. No, what he did was at the end of every staff meeting, I think it was like Monday mornings, at the end of every staff meeting, he would have one person share a story of how they made someone's life better. You know, maybe it was a teller helping an older lady kind of figuring out, you know, this technology, or helping a small business owner like be successful. By telling those stories, it really helped bring up the purpose. Like, it helped people feel like they were doing something important. So like, what are other ways? Are there ways you can give autonomy? Let your employees make some more of the decisions, to take ownership. Is there a way to use feedback and like mixing things up and making connections and helping them feel belongingness and all those kinds of things? Can you just make little tweaks that would make a huge difference in motivation? So the next thing we want to talk about, like, all of these are important, I think. And I think just like tweaking any one of them is probably going to help motivate your employees. But I'll be honest, some of these things, like autonomy for me, is huge. Purpose, yeah, I think that's a pretty big deal. But some of those things are not quite as important as other things. Everybody's a little bit different, right? So I think one of the first steps is to start to figure out what motivates you as a leader. What is going to help you? Is there something you can change in your everyday life to help you get up in the morning and go to work and feel like, you know, I love this job, or I'm going to really do, I'm going to do this job and do it well. So one of the things that we use the DISC assessment. I don't know how many of you have used the DISC, if you're familiar with it. I love the DISC. It's like, it reads my mind. It's like every now and then it's like, oh my gosh, it's so neat. But I do think you can use like something like a DISC personality assessment to gain insight into what might be more motivational for you, what you can lean into. Because what we tend to do as leaders, what motivates me is what I assume motivates everybody else in the organization. And I'm not sure that that is actually true. So I'd like to just quickly go through these, some of these DISC things, and then talk about how motivation might be different for each one of these. So with the DISC, the D is like direct, leader, like powerful, type A, let's go for it, like in front, like that's the D, right? The I tend to be an I. I love getting excited about things. I love getting other people excited about things. I like adventure, being with people, some of those kinds of things. An S is going to be much more supportive and collaborative and working with people and like really loves being part of a team. And a C is going to be someone who just thrives on facts and logic and expertise, clear expectations, stability, those kinds of things, right? So I do think motivation is going to be different for each one of these kinds of types of people. So think for a second, which one of these things might best describe what motivates you? I look at this and I'm like big time over the top I person. I love things that are fun. I love having fun. If I'm having fun doing my job, is like I am all into that, right? Honestly, I like to be recognized. I'm not one of those people who's good at just like behind the scenes. Like, I don't want to be behind the scene. I want to be in front of the scene because maybe I am the scene. I enjoy that, right? So being recognized. I love being with people, working on teams, having fun, and I love like changing it up. I love change. And so that whole task variety for me is important. But I'll tell you what, I work with someone in my university, and change is not his friend. And I see change as a motivator. It's like, oh my gosh, we get to try something new. This is going to be so fun. And he's like, no, Peggy's making another change. No. He's motivated by like stability. He knows exactly what is going to happen next. And that feels good. It feels safe. And that is motivating for him. So it's interesting. So those are two different kinds of, I think, personality types, different motivations. So here's my question, Megan Sands. I've been trying to figure out where you would fall on this whole thing. So what do you think?
I think for me, some of my, and if you've done this assessment, there's kind of a connection between these. So I think for me, I'm probably in between the D and a C type. And so when I think about motivation specifically, I know for myself that I am motivated by a challenge, by trying something that's difficult and figuring out something that's new. I'm definitely driven by results. If I participate in something and I don't see the results, or the results are not showing that we're productive, then I'm no longer motivated and I'm not going to do that task anymore. I'm also definitely motivated by having autonomy. So I see that even in the jobs that I like to be in and things that I'm pursuing in my personal life, because I know that I want to be in charge of things. I don't want to just follow orders from someone else. And winning. So for me, I am a competitive person. I want to be on top. I want to strive to be the best at whatever it is that I'm doing. And so for me, excellence is really motivating. The idea of really being better and growing in something motivates me significantly. And so I have to think when I'm managing a team or working with people, okay, that's how I'm motivated. But for some other people, as you just mentioned, maybe competition or winning is not the motivator for someone else. Maybe they're much more driven by the personal relationships they're making in the workplace and the teamwork that they're able to have. And so it's helpful for me to be reminded of these things, because we, as you said earlier, we can't assume that other people are motivated and work in the same way that we do. And so as leaders and managers and colleagues, really in any way that you're influencing someone else in the workplace, we have to remember that they are different and they operate very differently than we do. So I think this is really helpful to kind of course, there's a lot more complexity to a person than just these types, but it's really helpful to have a framework to start from.
Yeah, exactly. All right. So the other thing, okay, full disclosure, I asked my friend ChatGPT what were other ways that people differ according to motivation. And ChatGPT brought up this idea that generations are actually motivated differently, which, I think I buy into a little bit. How I'm motivated is probably a little bit different than how Megan is motivated. And know if you notice this, but I'm a little bit more experienced than Megan. So we just thought we'd throw this out there just to get you thinking, like, how do people differ according to how they want to be motivated? And as a leader, how can you leverage that to kind of figure out how to get someone unstuck and to get them more excited about their job? So some of the ideas that my friend ChatGPT came up with, baby boomers, that may or may not be me, authority and expertise. So I'll be honest, authority makes a difference for me. I pay attention to people with authority, loyalty, stability, titles, data-backed reasoning. Yeah, I don't know. And then Gen X, which is going to be, I guess, that white guy, the white hair on one side, and then the other guy. I don't know. Autonomy, flexibility, skill building, going higher in an organization, maybe, options, not mandates. Yeah, I'm not sure about some of this. Now I'm rethinking this. Okay.
I think similar to what we've said so far, though, I think some of these are patterns, but things you can think about situationally and where people fit. But the generational patterns tend to make sense if you think about how each of these groups grew up, what the world looked like when they were entering the workforce, and where we are today. That's some of how I think about it as I think of the next two generations that we talk about.
Well, and me as a leader being a little bit with a different kind of background, like you said, is going to make it, I have to be aware of how younger people see, how I give them instructions and how I make my expectations clear. What do you what do you think about some of these?
Yeah, so then if I look at millennials and Gen Z, I think some of the difference here is almost so the one area you highlighted on the last slide was that authority really matters. It's kind of the most important for some in the boomer generation. And I think the further we go down in millennial and Gen Z, the authority is really not the end all be all. I think authority has to be earned for some of the younger generation, that having a title is not enough for a typical Gen Z person to trust your opinion.
Yes.
And so I think if we look at some of these patterns here with millennials, a lot of as that group of people was entering the workforce, it was all about like finding your purpose and living towards a bigger mission and having a lot more collaboration and less independent work. So this influences somewhat how this generation might be motivated. And then with Gen Z, really authenticity and transparency, them understanding the process and how we came to a decision seems to be really important, and being able to participate in that co-creation of opportunities. I think this last bullet is co-creation, and a lot of this drives our approach and a lot of the work that we do. So I think this really spans a lot of generations, but it might matter more to the youngest generation in the workplace than others, that rather than an authoritative figure coming in and sharing the plan, that the Gen Z gets to participate in creating that plan, I think is important. So again, a lot of these they're helpful patterns to think of in a large sense and consider. We're not saying that every single person that falls in these generations is motivated in these ways, but it's helpful to think of, again, highlighting that situations matter and individual people really matter as we talk about this.
Yes, absolutely. So just a couple of last ideas. If you're a leader, like, how can you create an environment that is motivating for employees, knowing that everybody's going to be motivated a little bit differently, but what things can you tweak in your culture to help your employees feel supported and motivated? Some of this has to do with teaming, right? To the collaboration, cohesive teams, belongingness, connections. I think that makes a huge difference. Work-life balance, positive culture, all of those things. You bring these kinds of things together, and just keeping an eye on what is motivation and how can we build motivation.
Yeah, and for us, a lot of how we apply our work to this is really in thinking about, again, as I said at the beginning, that leadership requires motivation. In order to influence people towards a specific direction or to perform better, we have to focus on them as people and look at how to motivate and influence them. And when Turning West comes in a lot of times to help organizations or teams or individual people to first assess where we are currently. What does our engagement look like right now? What does our culture look like right now? How is our team feeling about their role and what's motivating for them? And so a lot of our work starts with the assessment. So if you're looking to understand where you fall in this, Turning West really supports that, whether it's a DISC assessment or a more thorough organization-wide assessment. And a lot of our implementation and the consulting that solves these problems really comes down to executive coaching and team development and processes where we're designing jobs or designing organization structures to fit a lot of these ideas. If we think of the executive coaching example, we often are helping coach people that say, you know what, I have this really challenging employee, or I have someone that's really not performing, and what can I do to help them to be better in the workplace? And we as coaches are often the one challenging them to say, okay, what do you think might motivate this person? Where do you think this person is has strengths that you can lean into to tap into their intrinsic motivation and things like this? And overall, really advising and helping in strategic planning and other processes where we're helping to set a clear vision so that everyone can rally around a bigger idea of where we're headed in the future. So there's a lot of different ways you can apply this, whether you're working with an outside organization like Turning West, or you're trying to apply this internally. I hope this was really helpful to give you some strategies for first thinking about motivation, prioritizing it, and then putting in some strategies for how to really motivate your employees and ultimately help us all to excel and advance our organizations in a positive way.
And at the end of the day, just because telling your employees, I'm the boss, you do what I say, is not the best way to motivate people, right? People are individuals, and by treating people as individuals and figuring out what motivates them and what motivates you as well, I think is going to make the whole organization so much more successful. So thank you very much for joining us today. If you want to learn more, we would be happy to talk to you. Just send us an email.
Yeah, please feel free to reach out and be on the lookout for our next webinar invite. We're going to be talking next month on July 30th about conflict management and some of the healthy strategies for utilizing conflict in organizations. So if that is an area of interest and you want to keep talking to us about that, join us on July 30th, and we'll be sending you all an email to sign up for that. But again, if you have follow-up questions or any interest in speaking to us, feel free to reach out. We're really grateful for your time this morning and hope that you got some valuable information out of this. All right. Thank you all. Hope you have a great day.